The champagne bubbles felt like tiny daggers against my throat as I stood in the corner of the grand ballroom at the Riverside Country Club. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over 200 guests in their finest attire, celebrating my cousin Jennifer's wedding to her investment banker fiancé. Everyone looked perfect. Everyone belonged. Everyone except me. I smoothed down my thrift store navy dress, the only formal wear I owned, and tried to make myself invisible behind a towering flower arrangement. The fabric was slightly faded, and I'd spent an hour that morning trying to cover a small stain near the hem with a safety pin and some creative folding. My shoes were borrowed from my roommate, half a size too small, pinching my feet with every step. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The reception was everything my family valued: expensive, prestigious, proper. Uncle Richard had spared no expense for his daughter's big day. Ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra, caviar stations, and enough flowers to open a florist shop. This was the Richardson family standard, the level of success and sophistication expected from everyone who carried the name. I watched my mother, Patricia Richardson, glide through the crowd in her emerald silk gown, air-kissing relatives and basking in compliments about how distinguished our family looked. She was in her element here, surrounded by doctors, lawyers, and business executives. Her perfectly styled silver hair caught the light as she laughed at someone's joke, diamond earrings sparkling with each movement. Then I saw her eyes find mine across the room. Her smile faltered for just a moment. So brief that no one else would notice, but I caught it. The look that said, "Try not to embarrass me tonight." My younger brother Marcus stood near the head table in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, fresh out of law school and already making connections. He fit seamlessly into conversations about portfolio management and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Everything came easy to Marcus. The right schools, the right internships, the right social circle. He was Mom's pride and joy, the son who understood what success looked like. I clutched my small purse tighter, feeling the weight of the business cards inside. Not networking cards for some prestigious firm, but simple white cards with black text: Jake Morrison, content creator and digital marketing consultant. They felt like contraband in this room full of traditional professionals. The band struck up a waltz and couples began moving to the dance floor. I retreated further into my corner, hoping to avoid the inevitable questions about what I was doing with my life. At family gatherings, I'd perfected the art of changing subjects quickly, or excusing myself to the bathroom when conversations turned to careers. That's when she appeared beside me, silent as a predator stalking prey. I didn't see her approach. One moment I was alone, the next moment my mother's perfectly manicured hand was on my elbow, her grip firm and cold. "Walk with me," she whispered, her voice carrying the kind of authority that had terrified me as a child. She guided me toward the terrace doors, away from the crowd, away from listening ears. The night air hit my face as we stepped outside onto the marbled terrace overlooking the country club's golf course. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and the distant sound of laughter and music drifted through the open doors behind us. It should have been beautiful, romantic even. Instead, it felt like walking toward an execution. Mom released my arm and turned to face me, her expression cold and calculated. In the soft light, I could see every line of disappointment etched around her eyes, every crease of frustration around her mouth. "Do you see what's happening there?" she began, her voice low and venomous. "Your cousin just married a man who makes more in bonuses than most people see in a lifetime. Marcus just got hired by Davidson and Associates, one of the most prestigious firms in Chicago. Even your cousin Tommy announced his promotion to senior partner tonight." I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand, silencing me. "And then there's you." She looked me up and down, taking in my discount dress, my uncomfortable shoes, my nervous posture. 27 years old, living in some cramped apartment, making videos on the internet like a teenager. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is for me to explain what my eldest son does for a living? The word videos dripped from her lips like it was something dirty, something shameful. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, a combination of anger and humiliation that made my hands shake slightly. "Mom, you're an embarrassment, Jake." The words hit me like a physical blow. An absolute embarrassment to this family. While everyone else is building real careers, real futures, you're playing around on the internet like success is some kind of game. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper that somehow felt louder than if she'd been shouting. Look around you. This is what success looks like. This is what the Richardson name means. And you're a joke. A 30-year-old joke who still thinks making videos is going to pay for a retirement fund or buy you a house or give you any kind of real security. I stared at her, speechless. Years of subtle disappointments, backhanded compliments, and worried sighs had built up to this moment. But hearing it stated so clearly, so brutally, left me reeling. I don't know what I did wrong raising you, she continued, shaking her head. Your father and I gave you every opportunity, sent you to good schools, introduced you to the right people, and this is what you chose. This is how you repay everything we've done for you. Through the terrace doors, I could see the wedding reception continuing in full swing. Happy couples dancing, families laughing, success stories being shared over expensive champagne, a world where I clearly didn't belong. I'm doing well, Mom, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm making good money. I have clients who... She laughed, sharp and bitter. Good money? Jake, your cousin Jennifer's wedding dress cost more than you probably made last month. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending that what you do is anything more than an expensive hobby. The silence stretched between us, filled only with the distant sound of the orchestra and the gentle rustle of wind through the trees. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a world that had no place for me. I want you to think very carefully about your choices, she said finally, her tone shifting to something almost maternal, which somehow made it worse. Because this family won't carry deadweight forever. And right now, that's exactly what you are. She smoothed her dress, checked her reflection in the terrace doors, and plastered her social smile back in place. Just like that, she transformed back into Patricia Richardson, the perfect hostess, the proud family matriarch. Now come inside and try not to say anything that will embarrass us further, she said, turning toward the door. And for God's sake, stand up straight. You look like you're apologizing for existing. That was 8 months ago. Last night, my phone rang. It was my mother again. Only this time, she wasn't calling to criticize me. She was calling to beg. Growing up in Westchester County, I was the kid with a camcorder permanently attached to my hand and a head full of stories no one wanted to hear. While Marcus was perfecting his tennis serve at the country club and Jennifer was winning debate tournaments, I was hiding in my bedroom editing together elaborate home movies on my dad's ancient desktop computer. I started with family gatherings, birthdays, holidays, random Tuesday dinners, turning ordinary moments into cinematic experiences with dramatic music, slow motion effects, and carefully crafted narratives. I'd spend hours in post-production, adjusting color grading and adding transitions, treating each 3-minute family video like it was destined for the Academy Awards. My parents tolerated it at first. It's just a phase, I heard my mother tell her sister over the phone when I was 14. All boys go through creative periods. He'll grow out of it when he discovers girls and sports. But I didn't grow out of it. If anything, my passion grew stronger. I discovered YouTube when I was 16. This magical platform where ordinary people could share their stories with the world. I spent entire nights watching creators who started with nothing but a camera and an idea, building audiences of millions, creating businesses from their bedrooms. My first video was a disaster. Jake's daily life, a painfully awkward vlog where I tried to document a typical day in suburban Connecticut. Shaky camera work, terrible audio, rambling commentary about nothing particularly interesting. It got 12 views, and 8 of those were from me checking to see if the upload had worked properly. But something about those 12 views ignited a fire in me. 12 strangers had chosen to spend 3 minutes of their lives watching something I created. They left comments. Not many, and most were criticism, but they engaged with my work. They cared enough to respond. I started making videos about everything: movie reviews, technology unboxings, comedy skits with my friends, tutorials for video editing software. My bedroom became a makeshift studio, with bedsheets hung as backdrops and desk lamps, positioned for optimal lighting. I learned about audio compression, color theory, and storytelling structure through trial and error and countless YouTube tutorials. At 17, one of my videos went semi-viral. It was a parody of a popular commercial, filmed with my friends in various locations around our neighborhood. Nothing groundbreaking, but it hit some kind of algorithmic sweet spot and suddenly had 50,000 views and hundreds of comments. For a week, I felt like I'd conquered the world. I showed it to my parents at dinner, practically vibrating with excitement. "Look, Mom, Dad, 50,000 people watched this. That's more than the population of our entire town." My father, David Richardson, barely glanced at the laptop screen. He was more interested in his grilled salmon and the Wall Street Journal folded beside his plate. "That's nice, son," he said absently, "but views don't pay college tuition." My mother was slightly more engaged but ultimately dismissive. "It's impressive that you can use all that technology," she said. "But what's the practical application? How does this help you get into a good university?" They didn't understand that this wasn't just a hobby for me. It was a calling. While my classmates were stressing about SAT scores and college applications, I was learning real skills: marketing, psychology, business development, project management. Every video was a small business venture. Every subscriber was a customer. Every comment was market research. I applied to Northwestern University's journalism program and got accepted, which satisfied my parents' need for prestigious education. But I chose my classes strategically: media production, digital marketing, communications theory. I wasn't just getting a degree, I was building a foundation for the career I already knew I wanted. College was where everything clicked. I started a YouTube channel called Campus Chronicles, a mix of university life content, study tips, and comedy sketches featuring student experiences. My production quality improved dramatically with access to professional equipment, and my storytelling became more sophisticated. By junior year, I was making enough money from YouTube ad revenue to pay for my textbooks and groceries. Small amounts, maybe $300 or $400 a month, but it was my first taste of earning money from something I genuinely loved doing. I also discovered brand partnerships. A local coffee shop offered me $50 to feature their drinks in one of my study session videos. A textbook company sent me free books in exchange for honest reviews. These weren't life-changing sums, but they proved that businesses saw value in what I was creating. The channel grew steadily. 5,000 subscribers, then 10,000, then 25,000. I started getting invitations to creator meetups and brand events. Other students began recognizing me around campus. I was building something real, something valuable. But at every family gathering, the questions remained the same. When are you going to get a real job? What's your backup plan? Don't you think it's time to be more serious about your future? In my junior year, I landed an internship with the digital marketing agency in Chicago. It was unpaid, but I got hands-on experience with social media campaigns, content strategy, and influencer partnerships. I learned how the business side of content creation worked, how brands evaluated partnerships, how to measure return on investment. The internship supervisor, Michelle Chen, became an informal mentor. She was the first adult who took my YouTube work seriously, asking detailed questions about my analytics, my audience demographics, and my content strategy. She treated my channel like a legitimate business venture rather than an expensive hobby. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. "You have a natural understanding of audience engagement," she told me during my final evaluation. "Most of our clients pay thousands of dollars for the kind of authentic connection you've built with your subscribers. Don't let anyone tell you that what you're doing isn't real business." Senior year, I made a decision that horrified my parents. I turned down a corporate training program at a Fortune 500 company to focus full-time on content creation and freelance digital marketing. My savings account had grown to $15,000, money I'd earned entirely through my online work, and I had several clients lined up for post-graduation projects. The night I broke the news to my family was the first time I saw real anger from my father. Not disappointment, not concern. Actual anger. "You're throwing your life away," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "We spent $200,000 on your education so you could make videos in your bedroom? David, calm down, my mother interjected, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Jake, sweetheart, maybe you could do both? Take the corporate job and keep the videos as a side project? I tried to explain my 5-year plan, my client testimonials, and my growing revenue streams. I showed them spreadsheets and analytics reports, proof that I was building something sustainable. But they couldn't see past their own definitions of success. This is exactly the kind of impractical thinking that will leave you broke and desperate at 40, Mom said. What happens when the internet moves on to the next trend? What happens when you're too old for this nonsense? That conversation ended with me packing my belongings and moving to a studio apartment in Lincoln Park, Chicago, funded entirely by my content creation income. For the first time in my life, I was completely financially independent, but I'd never felt more alone. The distance between my family and me grew wider over the following years. I attended mandatory events, holidays, birthdays, weddings, but I learned to deflect questions about my work and change subjects when conversations turned to careers. It was easier to let them think I was struggling than to deal with their inability to understand what I'd built. By the time Jennifer's wedding rolled around, I had 47,000 YouTube subscribers, a roster of regular clients paying me between $2,000 and $5,000 per project, and enough money in my savings account to put a down payment on a condo. But sitting in that country club, wearing my discount dress and enduring my mother's whispered humiliation, I felt like the same insecure teenager who'd uploaded his first awkward vlog to 12 views. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years building confidence and success in my professional life, but 30 seconds with my family could reduce me to feeling worthless and small. That night on the terrace, listening to my mother call me an embarrassment, I realized that no amount of external validation could fill the void left by people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, but only accepted you conditionally. I walked back into that reception hall, not broken, not defeated, but clear about something I'd been avoiding for years. My family's approval wasn't just unlikely, it was irrelevant to my actual success and happiness. What I didn't know was that the most important conversation of my life was waiting for me just inside those terrace doors. Moving to Chicago was like learning to breathe underwater, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. My studio apartment in Lincoln Park was 400 square feet of possibility and panic. A Murphy bed that doubled as my office space, a kitchenette smaller than most people's closets, and exactly one window that faced a brick wall. But it was mine, paid for with money I'd earned from work I loved. The first 6 months were brutal. My YouTube channel, Campus Chronicles, had lost relevance after graduation. College content doesn't hit the same level when you're no longer in college. My subscriber growth stagnated, and my views dropped by 60%. I'd built my entire brand around being a student, and suddenly I was just another 22-year-old with a camera and opinions. I spent my days in coffee shops, frantically applying for freelance projects on platforms like Upwork and Fiverr, video editing gigs for $10 an hour, social media management for small businesses that paid $30 a week, content writing projects that barely covered my groceries. I'd wake up at 6 a.m. and work until midnight, cobbling together enough income to cover rent and ramen noodles. The worst part wasn't the financial stress, it was the isolation. In college, I'd been surrounded by people who understood creative ambition, who celebrated viral videos and successful brand partnerships. In the real world, especially when I called home, my struggles were met with barely concealed "I told you so" energy. "How's the video thing going?" My mother would ask during our weekly phone calls, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer would disappoint her. "It's going well," I'd lie, sitting on my air mattress. I couldn't afford a real bed yet. Eating cereal for dinner. Building the foundation, you know? These things take time. "Marcus just got promoted again," she'd counter. "Did I mention he's looking at buying a place in River North? Such a smart investment at his age." Those calls left me questioning everything. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was being impractical, immature, irresponsible. Maybe 22 was too old to be chasing creative dreams instead of building traditional security. But then something would happen. A client would love a video I created, a freelance project would go viral, a brand would reach out for a partnership, and I'd remember why I'd chosen this path. The work itself energized me in a way that no corporate job ever could have. I was solving problems, telling stories, helping businesses connect with their customers in authentic ways. My breakthrough came from the most unexpected place, a local dog grooming business called Pampered Paws. The owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, had hired me for $50 to create a simple promotional video. She expected something basic, maybe a slideshow with stock music. Instead, I spent 3 days filming a mini documentary about her business, interviewing customers about their relationships with their pets, capturing the transformation process from scruffy to stylish. The final video was 7 minutes long and cost me more in time and effort than I was being paid, but it told a real story. It showed Mrs. Rodriguez's genuine care for the animals, the joy on owners' faces when they picked up their freshly groomed pets, the community that had formed around this small neighborhood business. Mrs. Rodriguez cried when she saw it, not polite, professional tears, actual sobbing. "This is exactly what I wanted to show people but could never explain," she said. "You captured the heart of what we do here." She posted the video on her Facebook page, and within a week it had been shared over 1,000 times throughout Chicago dog owner groups. Pampered Paws booked solid for 2 months straight. Mrs. Rodriguez referred me to 3 other local businesses before the month was over. That's when I realized my competitive advantage wasn't technical skill or equipment, it was empathy. I could see the story that businesses wanted to tell about themselves and help them tell it in a way that resonated with their customers. I wasn't just making videos, I was translating passion into profit. I rebranded myself from Campus Chronicles Jake to Morrison Media Solutions and focused exclusively on small business storytelling. My rates went from $10 an hour to $50 an hour, then to project-based pricing that reflected the value I was providing rather than just the time I was spending. The clients started coming through referrals rather than cold applications. A yoga studio wanted to show how their classes built community, not just flexibility. A bookstore owner wanted to highlight the personal recommendations and cozy atmosphere that Amazon couldn't replicate. A food truck entrepreneur wanted to share the story of how he'd built his business after losing his restaurant job during the pandemic. Each project taught me something new about business psychology, marketing strategy, and human nature. I learned that customers don't buy products. They buy feelings, identities, solutions to problems they didn't even know they had. My job was to help businesses articulate those emotional connections through visual storytelling. By my second year in Chicago, I was charging between $1,500 and $3,000 per project and booking 2 to 3 projects per month. I moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, bought actual furniture, and started saving money for the first time in my adult life. More importantly, I was building a reputation. Business owners started seeking me out specifically, not just because I created quality videos, but because I understood their challenges. I could walk into a struggling restaurant and identify not just their marketing problems, but their brand positioning issues, their customer experience gaps, their competitive disadvantages. This led to my next evolution, comprehensive digital marketing consulting. Instead of just creating videos, I started offering complete brand strategy packages, website development, social media management, content planning, influencer partnerships, email marketing campaigns. I became a one-stop solution for small businesses that couldn't afford big agencies but needed professional-level marketing. The income jumped again. $5,000 packages, then $8,000, then $12,000 for complete brand overhauls. I hired my first freelance assistant, a recent graduate named Sarah, who handled the administrative work while I focused on strategy and creative direction. 3 years in, I launched Small Business Spotlight, a new YouTube channel that featured the stories of entrepreneurs I worked with. Instead of just creating marketing content for their businesses, I was sharing their journeys with a broader audience. The channel grew rapidly because it filled a specific niche, authentic small business content that wasn't trying to sell anything directly. Small Business Spotlight hit 50,000 subscribers in 8 months. Brands started reaching out for sponsorship opportunities. I was invited to speak at marketing conferences and small business workshops. Industry publications started featuring my work in case studies and best practices articles. But the real validation came from my clients. I watched Mrs. Rodriguez open a second Pampered Paws location. The yoga studio owner launched an online course that generated 6 figures in revenue. The bookstore became a neighborhood institution, with customers driving from across the city for events and recommendations. I wasn't just making videos anymore. I was changing lives, helping people build sustainable businesses around their passions, proving that small enterprises could compete with corporate giants if they had the right story and the right strategy. By year 4, Morrison Media Solutions was generating consistent 6-figure annual revenue. I had a team of 5 freelancers, an office space in River North, and a waiting list of potential clients. I was invited to join the Chicago Entrepreneurs Organization and started mentoring other young business owners. The success felt surreal sometimes. I'd walk through downtown Chicago, past the corporate towers where my college friends worked in cubicles, knowing that I'd built something meaningful from nothing but a camera and a willingness to work harder than anyone thought was necessary. But I still hadn't told my family any of this. At every wedding, holiday gathering, and family dinner, I deflected questions about my work and allowed them to assume I was still struggling. Part of it was self-protection. I didn't want to deal with their skepticism or their inability to understand what I'd built. Part of it was spite. If they couldn't support me when I was struggling, why should they celebrate when I was succeeding? The distance between my professional confidence and my family relationships created a strange double life. At work, I was Morrison, the marketing strategist who commanded respect and premium prices. At family events, I was still Jake, the disappointment who played around on the internet instead of getting a real job. Jennifer's wedding was supposed to be just another performance in this ongoing charade. I'd show up, smile politely, deflect questions about my career, and leave early with another story about why I didn't quite fit in with the Richardson family definition of success. But standing on that terrace, listening to my mother call me an embarrassment while I had more money in my business account than Marcus made in a year, something fundamental shifted inside me. I realized I wasn't protecting anyone by hiding my success. I was enabling them to continue treating me like a failure. That night, walking back into the reception after my mother's brutal assessment of my worth, I made a decision. I was done apologizing for existing. Done pretending to be smaller than I was. Done allowing other people's limited imagination to define what my success looked like. What happened next changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone who had ever written me off as the family embarrassment. The transition back into the reception hall felt like entering a different dimension. The same crystal chandeliers, the same orchestra music, the same conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes, but I was seeing it all through different eyes. My mother's words still stung, but underneath the hurt was something new. A quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I'd built. I walked to the bar and ordered a whiskey neat, not because I particularly wanted alcohol, but because I needed a moment to recalibrate. The bartender, a young guy probably working his way through college, recognized me from my YouTube channel. "Hey, you're Morrison Media, right?" he said quietly, sliding the drink across the marble bar top. "I watched your video about pricing creative services. Helped me negotiate better wages at my photography gigs." I nodded, surprised to be recognized here of all places. "That's great to hear. Photography's tough. You have to know your worth." "Exactly. My family thinks I'm wasting time with the creative stuff, but videos like yours help me see the business side." He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Keep doing what you're doing, man. You're helping people like me figure it out." The brief interaction felt like a lifeline. While my mother saw embarrassment, strangers saw value. While my family saw failure, my audience saw guidance. The disconnect was becoming impossible to ignore. I spent the rest of the reception observing rather than participating. My cousin Jennifer looked radiant in her $15,000 dress, accepting congratulations on her marriage to someone she'd met through their mutual trust funds. Marcus held court near the head table, discussing his latest case with a group of lawyers and judges who nodded appreciatively at his insights. Uncle Richard gave a speech about family legacy, about building something meaningful that would last for generations. He talked about the Richardson name meaning excellence, integrity, and success. As he spoke, I found myself calculating numbers in my head. My annual revenue versus his, my profit margins versus his overhead, My growth trajectory versus his stagnant corporate salary. The irony was staggering. I was surrounded by people who talked constantly about success, while I was living it quietly, invisibly, in ways they couldn't recognize or understand. Around midnight, as the reception was winding down, I made my polite goodbyes and slipped out to the parking lot. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my assistant. Client emergency, needs to reschedule tomorrow's strategy session. Also, Forbes wants to interview you for their 30 Under 30 feature. Need your availability. Forbes, 30 Under 30. I sat in my rented Honda Civic, staring at the message in the glow of my phone screen. Forbes had reached out because of a case study they'd seen about my work with a Chicago restaurant chain, how I'd helped them pivot to delivery only during the pandemic and actually increase their revenue by 40%. My first instinct was excitement, followed immediately by a familiar urge to call my parents and share the news. Then I remembered my mother's voice. "You're an embarrassment." The excitement curdled into something harder, more protective. I drove back to my apartment in silence, past the Starbucks where I'd spent countless hours applying for $10 freelance gigs, past the McDonald's where I'd eaten dollar menu dinners during my first year in Chicago. The city looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I had. The next morning, I had 3 client calls, 2 strategy sessions, and a content creation workshop I was teaching for the Chicago Small Business Association. My calendar was booked solid for the next 6 weeks, and my waiting list had grown to 43 potential clients. The business was thriving in ways I could never have imagined when I'd first uploaded that awkward campus vlog. But I didn't call my family to share any of it. I didn't post about the Forbes interview on social media where my relatives might see it. I didn't mention the speaking engagement at the National Marketing Conference or the book deal I was negotiating with a business publishing house. Instead, I maintained the facade. When Mom called for our weekly check-in, I let her believe I was still struggling. When Marcus mentioned his latest promotion at Sunday dinner, I smiled and congratulated him without mentioning that I'd just signed a $25,000 consulting contract with a national retail chain. The silence became a form of self-protection, but it also became a prison. I was living a double life, professionally confident and personally invisible. My business success felt hollow, when the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally couldn't love me at all. 3 months after Jennifer's wedding, I was featured on the cover of Chicago Business Journal as one of the city's rising marketing innovators. The article detailed my journey from college YouTuber to 6-figure consultant, highlighting specific client success stories and my unique approach to small business brand development. I bought 5 copies of the magazine and kept them in my desk drawer, never showing them to anyone. The achievement felt incomplete without witnesses, without people who had known me before I was successful celebrating how far I'd come. 6 months later, I spoke at South by Southwest about the future of content marketing for small businesses. My presentation was standing room only, and the video got over 100,000 views within a week. Industry leaders reached out for collaboration opportunities. A venture capital firm asked if I wanted to scale Morrison Media Solutions into a franchise model. But at Marcus's birthday dinner that weekend, when my aunt asked what I'd been up to lately, I said, "Oh, just working on some projects, keeping busy." The conversation moved on quickly to Marcus's latest courtroom victory and my cousin's new promotion. The pattern continued for years. External validation and internal isolation. Professional recognition and family dismissal. I was building something remarkable while pretending to be ordinary, succeeding at a level my family couldn't imagine while allowing them to see me as a failure. The most painful part wasn't their inability to understand my success. It was my own inability to stop seeking their approval. Despite everything I'd accomplished, despite the clients who thanked me for changing their businesses, despite the strangers who recognized me in bars and credited my videos with helping them pursue their own dreams, I still felt like that insecure kid asking his parents to be proud of his 50,000 view video. By the time my business hit 7 figures in annual revenue, 5 years after that humiliating night at Jennifer's wedding, I had achieved everything I'd dreamed of professionally. I owned my apartment, had a team of 12 employees, and was being courted by major agencies who wanted to acquire Morrison Media Solutions. But I was also profoundly lonely. Success without witnesses felt empty. Achievement without acknowledgement felt meaningless. I had built an empire while pretending to live in a shack, and the cognitive dissonance was exhausting. The Forbes 30 Under 30 article finally published a full-page feature about how I'd revolutionized small business marketing through authentic storytelling. The piece included photos of me in my River North office, quotes from grateful clients, and revenue projections that put me in the top tier of young entrepreneurs in the Midwest. I held the magazine in my hands, feeling the weight of external validation that I'd been craving since childhood. This was proof, undeniable, published proof, that I had built something significant, something worthy of respect and recognition. I almost called my mother, almost sent her a photo of the article, almost broke the silence I'd maintained for years. Instead, I put the magazine in my desk drawer with all the others, because I realized that if they could only see my value, when it was validated by outside sources, they didn't really see me at all. And if I needed their approval to feel successful, then I wasn't as confident as I pretended to be. The irony was perfect. I had everything my family claimed to value: financial security, professional recognition, industry respect. But because it didn't look like their definition of success, it remained invisible to them. And because I kept it invisible, they continued to treat me like family disappointment. That dynamic was about to change in the most unexpected way possible. Because sometimes life forces clarity on you whether you're ready for it or not. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office. Morrison Media Solutions had just closed its best year ever. $1.3 million in revenue, expansion into 3 new cities, and a client retention rate of 94%. I was planning our 5-year growth strategy when my phone lit up with Mom on the caller ID. I almost let it go to voicemail. Our weekly calls had become increasingly strained, filled with her subtle criticisms and my carefully neutral responses. But something made me pick up. Maybe intuition, maybe guilt, maybe just the hope that this time would be different. "Jake, thank God you answered." Her voice was tight, strained in a way I'd never heard before. Gone was the controlled disapproval, replaced by something that sounded dangerously close to panic. "What's wrong?" I set down my reports, immediately alert. Despite our complicated relationship, the fear in her voice triggered every protective instinct I had. "It's Marcus," she took a shaky breath. "He's in trouble, serious trouble. My younger brother, the golden child, the family success story. In trouble?" The irony might have been amusing if Mom hadn't sounded so desperate. "What kind of trouble?" "He's been suspended from Davidson and Associates pending an ethics investigation. Something about mishandling client funds. Jake, they're talking about criminal charges. Embezzlement. Fraud." The words hit me like physical blows. Marcus, who had never broken a rule in his life, who color-coded his class notes and arrived early to every appointment, accused of stealing from clients? "There has to be some mistake," I said. "Marcus wouldn't." "I know that," Mom interrupted. "You know that. But the Illinois State Bar doesn't care what we know. They only care what they can prove. And right now, all the evidence points to your brother." She explained the situation in fragments, her voice breaking periodically. A high-profile divorce case where Marcus had been managing the client's assets during settlement negotiations. Over $800,000 that should have been held in escrow had somehow disappeared from the firm's trust account. Marcus claimed ignorance, but the digital trail led directly to his access codes and authorization signatures. "The senior partners are throwing him under the bus," Mom continued. "They're saying he acted alone, that they had no knowledge of his activities. His lawyer thinks they're setting him up as a scapegoat to protect the firm's reputation." I listened in stunned silence, trying to reconcile this narrative with the Marcus I knew. Cautious, methodical, almost pathologically honest. The same kid who had returned a $20 bill he found on the sidewalk when we were teenagers, because someone is probably looking for this. What does Marcus say happened? He says someone else had to have accessed his accounts, that he never authorized those transfers. But Jake, his passwords, his security codes, they're saying only he could have done it. The desperation in her voice was becoming more apparent with each sentence. This wasn't just about Marcus's career. This was about the Richardson family reputation, the thing my parents had valued above everything else, including their relationship with me. "What do you need, Mom?" I asked, though I was already beginning to suspect where this conversation was heading. "We need a lawyer, not just any lawyer. The best criminal defense attorney we can find. Someone who specializes in white-collar crime, someone with connections in the state attorney's office." She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. "The attorney we want charges a $100,000 retainer just to take the case. The total cost could be $300,000 or more if this goes to trial." There it was, the number that changed everything. "Your father and I have some savings, but not enough. We've already mortgaged the house. We're looking at selling my mother's jewelry, liquidating our retirement accounts. But even with all of that, we're still short." I stared out my office window at the Chicago skyline, processing the magnitude of what she was telling me. The family that had built their identity on financial success and social status was facing bankruptcy to save their golden child from prison. "Jake, I know we haven't always understood your choices," she continued, her voice smaller now, almost childlike. "But your family, you're Marcus's brother. He needs help, and you're the only one who might be able to provide it." The silence stretched between us. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual energy. People building businesses, chasing dreams, creating the kind of success that couldn't be measured in country club memberships or luxury cars. "How much do you need?" I asked finally. $150,000. I know it's a lot, but Jake, they're saying he could get 15 years if convicted. 15 years? He's only 29, his whole life would be over. I did some quick mental math. I had that amount in my business savings account, money I'd been planning to use for a major expansion, possibly acquiring a smaller marketing firm in Denver. It wouldn't bankrupt me, but it would definitely set back my growth plans. More importantly, it would change the entire dynamic between my family and me. For 5 years, they had dismissed my success because they couldn't see it. Now they needed it, which meant acknowledging it existed. "I need to think about this," I said. "Jake, please." The desperation was raw now. "I know we haven't been the most supportive family. I know we've been critical of your career choices. But this isn't about that. This is about saving your brother from prison." I said I need to think about it. "How long?" "Give me 24 hours. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and a legal pad, trying to work through the decision logically. On one column, I listed reasons to help. Family loyalty, Marcus's genuine innocence, which I believed. The devastating consequences if he was convicted. On the other column, I listed reasons to refuse. Years of dismissal and criticism, the irony of being needed. Only when I had something they wanted, the possibility that this would reinforce their view of me as nothing more than a financial resource. But the real decision wasn't happening on the legal pad. It was happening in my chest, where anger and love and hurt and obligation were wrestling for dominance. I called my best friend and business partner, Tommy Chen, for perspective. "Let me get this straight," he said after I explained the situation. "The family that called you an embarrassment and kicked you out of a wedding reception now wants you to fund their legal defense? That's about the size of it. And you're actually considering it?" I was quiet for a long moment. "He's my brother, Tommy. Whatever issues I have with my parents, Marcus is innocent in this. He didn't choose their attitudes toward me. But he didn't defend you either, did he? When your mom was tearing you down, where was he?" That hit harder than I wanted to admit. Marcus had stood by silently during years of family gatherings where my career was dismissed, my choices mocked, my absence from family photos barely acknowledged. He'd benefited from being the good son while watching me be cast as the disappointment. "Look," Tommy continued, "I'm not saying don't help him. But if you do this, do it with clear boundaries and clear expectations. Don't let them take your money and then go back to treating you like dirt." The next morning, I called my mother back. "I'll provide the money," I said, without preamble. The relief in her voice was palpable. "Jake, thank you. Thank you so much. We'll pay you back as soon as—" I'm not finished. My tone was firm enough to stop her mid-sentence. "I have conditions." "Of course, whatever you need. First, this is a loan, not a gift. I want a formal agreement with a repayment schedule and interest." "Yes, absolutely." "Second, I want complete transparency about the case. No more second-hand information through family gossip. I want direct updates from Marcus's attorney." "Done." "Third, and this is non-negotiable, The family dynamics change. The dismissive comments about my career end permanently. The subtle criticisms, the eye rolls, the implications that what I do isn't real work, all of it stops. She was quiet for a moment. Jake, I think you're being a little… Mom, I'm about to write a 6-figure check to save Marcus from prison. I'm doing this because he's family, because I believe in his innocence, and because I have the means to help, but I'm not doing it so you can continue treating me like I'm lesser than everyone else in the family. You're right, she said quietly. You're absolutely right. Things will change, I promise. One more thing. I want Marcus to know where the money came from. I want him to understand that his embarrassing older brother who plays around on the internet just saved his career and his freedom. Of course. 3 days later, I wired $150,000 to the law firm of Kellerman, Shaw & Associates, one of Chicago's most prestigious white-collar defense practices. The transaction represented 5 years of building Morrison Media Solutions from nothing. 5 years of proving that success could look different than what my family imagined. The receipt sat on my desk like a monument to irony. The family embarrassment had just become the family savior, using money earned from work they considered filthy to save their golden child from prison. But as I stared at that receipt, I realized something important. This wasn't about proving my worth to them anymore. It was about proving my character to myself. Marcus needed help, and I had the means to provide it. The decision to help said more about who I wanted to be than about what they deserved. What happened next would test whether they were capable of the changes they'd promised, or whether I'd just paid $150,000 to learn that some family dynamics never truly change. The transformation began immediately, but not in the way I expected. Within a week of transferring the money, I received a handwritten letter from Marcus, the first personal communication we'd exchanged in over 2 years. His handwriting was shaky, uncertain, nothing like the confident signatures I remembered from his law school graduation announcements. Jake, it began, I don't have words for what you've done for me. Mom told me about the loan, about how you didn't hesitate when they asked for help. I keep trying to remember the last time I stood up for you at a family gathering, and I honestly can't. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. The letter continued for 3 pages, acknowledging years of silent complicity in my family's dismissive treatment of my career. He wrote about how he'd always admired my courage to pursue something unconventional, but had never said so out loud. How he'd watched my confidence grow from a distance, while telling himself that my success couldn't be real, because it didn't look like traditional success. I've been living in a prison of other people's expectations for so long that I forgot what it felt like to make choices based on what I actually wanted, he wrote. Watching you build something from nothing while I've been coasting on institutional prestige has been humbling in ways I'm still processing. The letter ended with a promise. When this is over, I want to really know my brother. Not the version of you that shows up to family dinners and says what everyone wants to hear, but the real you. The guy who built $1 million business because he believed in something everyone else thought was worthless. I read that letter 5 times, feeling emotions I'd been suppressing for years. Anger at how long it had taken for this acknowledgement. Grief for the relationship we could have had if he'd been brave enough to see me sooner. And relief, overwhelming relief, that maybe it wasn't too late for us to connect as adults. The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone anticipated. Marcus's attorney, armed with the resources my loan provided, hired a team of forensic accountants and cybersecurity experts. Within 6 weeks, they'd traced the missing funds to a sophisticated embezzlement scheme, orchestrated by one of the firm's senior partners. The partner had been using junior associates' access codes to move money, creating digital paper trails that implicated younger lawyers while covering his own involvement. Marcus wasn't the only victim. 3 other associates had been unknowingly framed for various financial irregularities over the past 2 years. When the real culprit was arrested, the charges against Marcus were dropped immediately. The Illinois State Bar issued a formal apology. Davidson and Associates offered him a promotion and a substantial settlement to avoid a wrongful termination lawsuit. But Marcus surprised everyone by declining both offers. I'm done letting other people define what my career should look like, he told me over dinner the night his name was cleared. I want to start my own practice. Focus on helping people who've been wrongfully accused who don't have the resources to fight back against big institutions. I smiled, recognizing the spark of genuine passion I'd seen in my own eyes years earlier when I'd decided to leave traditional expectations behind. That sounds like a career choice your family might not understand, I said. He laughed, the first real laugh I'd heard from him since we were kids. Yeah, I'm finally ready to disappoint them in favor of doing something meaningful. My parents' reaction to my role in Marcus's salvation was complex and painful to watch. My mother went through what could only be described as an identity crisis, struggling to reconcile her previous dismissal of my success with her current gratitude for it. She started calling more frequently, asking detailed questions about my business that she'd never bothered to ask before. Not out of genuine interest, I realized, but out of guilt and confusion. She was trying to retroactively understand something she'd spent years refusing to see. I've been reading about digital marketing, she said during one particularly awkward phone call. I had no idea it was such a sophisticated field. You're really helping businesses grow? The conversations felt forced, performative, like she was trying to audition for the role of supportive mother after years of playing the disappointed critic. I appreciated the effort, but authenticity couldn't be manufactured overnight. My father took a different approach. He called exactly once after the charges against Marcus were dropped. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble, and a thank you. What you did for your brother, it says a lot about your character. Thanks, Dad. I want you to know that I see now what you've built, what you've accomplished. I may not understand it completely, but I respect it. I respect you. It was the conversation I'd wanted to have for 15 years, but hearing it now felt anticlimactic. The validation I'd craved as a struggling 22-year-old meant less to me as a successful 30-year-old who'd learned to validate himself. I appreciate that, I said. But I need you to understand something. I didn't build my business to prove you wrong about me. I built it because I loved the work and I was good at it. Your approval doesn't make it more real, and your disapproval never made it less real. There was a long silence before he spoke again. You're right, I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that. The most profound change happened at our next family gathering, Thanksgiving, 8 months after the legal crisis had resolved. I walked into my parents' house carrying a bottle of wine and a folder of materials I'd never brought to a family event before. Recent client testimonials, industry awards, speaking engagement invitations, and a printed copy of the Forbes article that had been gathering dust in my desk drawer. I thought you might want to see some of what I've been working on, I said, placing the folder on the coffee table where it sat like a bridge between my old family identity and my actual life. My mother picked up the Forbes article with trembling hands, reading it slowly while my father looked over her shoulder. My aunt and uncle crowded around, reading testimonials from clients who credited me with saving their businesses. Marcus sat beside me, proud and protective in a way he'd never been before. Jake, my aunt said quietly, this is incredible. You've helped all these businesses? Built all this yourself? I nodded, feeling strangely vulnerable despite my confidence in the work. It's been a journey. Lots of learning, lots of mistakes. But yeah, I built something I'm really proud of. The conversation that followed was different from any family discussion we'd ever had. Instead of surface-level pleasantries and subtle competitions, we talked about real challenges, meaningful work, and the courage it takes to build something from nothing. But the most important moment came later that evening, when Marcus pulled me aside. I've been thinking about what you said last month, about disappointing them in favor of doing meaningful work, he said. I wanted to tell you that I'm not taking the settlement money from Davidson and Associates. What? Marcus? That's probably a 7-figure settlement. You could use that to start your practice. He shook his head. I want to start clean, build something that's entirely mine the way you did. I know it'll be harder, and I know Mom and Dad won't understand, but I finally get why you chose the difficult path. Looking at my brother, really seeing him for the first time in years, I realized that my family's crisis had accomplished something I'd never expected. It hadn't just forced them to acknowledge my success. It had shown Marcus that success built on other people's expectations is ultimately hollow. 6 months later, Marcus opened Richardson Legal Aid, specializing in criminal defense for people who couldn't afford traditional representation. His first case was defending a young entrepreneur who'd been falsely accused of tax evasion. Someone whose unconventional business model had made him an easy target for investigators who didn't understand how modern commerce worked. "Reminds me of someone I know," Marcus said when he called to tell me about the case. "Someone who built something valuable that looked worthless to people who couldn't see past their own limitations." Today, 3 years later, my relationship with my family is complicated but honest. My parents still don't fully understand what I do, but they respect it. They ask questions about my work, celebrate my successes, and most importantly, they've stopped treating my choices like character flaws that need to be corrected. Marcus and I talk twice a week now, sharing business challenges and celebrating victories. His legal practice is thriving, and he often refers clients to me for help with their business marketing after their legal issues are resolved. We've built something together that we never had as kids, a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. My mother still struggles with guilt about the years she spent dismissing my work, but we're both learning to focus on moving forward rather than relitigating the past. She volunteers at a small business development center now, helping entrepreneurs write business plans and connect with resources. She tells me that working with people who are building something from nothing has given her new perspective on what courage and success actually look like. The loan was repaid in full, with interest, within 18 months. But the real return on investment wasn't financial. It was the family relationships that were rebuilt on a foundation of truth, rather than expectations. I think about that night at Jennifer's wedding sometimes, standing on the terrace while my mother called me an embarrassment. The pain of that moment was real, but it was also necessary. It forced me to stop seeking approval from people who were incapable of seeing my worth, and it started the process of building relationships based on who I actually was, rather than who they wanted me to be. The lesson I want to leave you with is this: your family's inability to understand your success doesn't make it less real. Their refusal to see your worth doesn't diminish your value, and their eventual recognition of your achievements doesn't validate what you've built. Your work validates itself through the lives it touches and the problems it solves. Don't shrink yourself to fit into other people's limited vision of what success should look like. Don't hide your light because it makes others uncomfortable. And don't wait for permission to be proud of what you've accomplished. Sometimes the people who love you most are also the people who understand you least. That's painful, but it doesn't have to be permanent. People can grow, relationships can evolve, and families can learn to celebrate differences instead of trying to eliminate them. Tasmal. But even if they can't, even if your family never acknowledges your worth, never celebrates your success, never apologizes for the years they made you feel small, you are not required to make yourself smaller to make them comfortable. You are not an embarrassment for choosing a different path. You are not a failure for building something that doesn't look like traditional success. And you are not obligated to prove your worth to people who benefit from believing you don't have any. Build your life, create your success, define your own worth. And if your family eventually comes around to seeing what you've always known about yourself, that's wonderful. But if they don't, that's their loss, not your failure. The most important approval you can ever receive is your own. Everything else is just noise. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.